I'm gonna open the Conservation Commission meeting for October 15th, 2024. Do roll call. Do we have a quorum here?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's 4 of us.
Okay, Ken,
Here.
Paul,
Yes,
Haley,
don't see her.
okay, Eleanor. And I'm here. Okay, so that's
4.
4. That'll do it. The first item is to, well, wait a minute. Yeah, the first item is to approve the minutes for October 1st. Has anyone looked at the minutes?
Yes.
Yes, reviewed them. They looked okay.
Okay, can I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Roll call. That was it. All right, the first item on the agenda.
Did you roll call?
Well, I did, I gave a roll call, didn't I? I gave one already.
Not to vote on the
Not on the,
passing the minutes.
Okay. Let's vote on the minutes. All in favor of accepting the minutes? Ken,
Yes.
Paul,
yes.
Eleanor,
Yes.
and me. Okay. First item on the list is Preston Street and New Salem Street. We have to discuss an order of conditions. I think Elaine has prepared something for us.
I sent them to Ethan. Ethan, do you have them that you could put on the screen?
I don't have them on my computer, but I sent them out to the commission.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got them and
don't
reviewed
have-
them.
So what I did was I took the possible conditions from previous meetings, things that you thought you might want to see, and put them into a list. So that's what these conditions reflect.
Can you see them on my screen?
Yeah,
Yep, good. Thanks, Ken.
Yep.
yes, thank you, Ken. There's only one thing I had that I saw that I think might have been forgotten is we said we were gonna have them clean the brook, and I don't see that on here. And at least clean the brook is, I don't know how far down it should go, but take out any kind of big branches or stuff like that that's in the brook, so it's flowing fine. Do you remember that, Elaine?
No, but I'm sure it was there.
Okay,
I'll just add that.
yeah,
So clean brook of large branches and any debris.
yeah, right.
Ken has also highlighted one typo there on this bullet.
Where's the typo?
Third
Oh, there
bullet
it
on the bottom.
Okay.
Otherwise, that looks like a good set of conditions.
Yeah.
Do we vote on those?
Yeah, we're in discussion right now. Is there any residents or that have any comments on this?
You can't take public comment. You already closed the public hearing.
What?
You can't, the public hearing is already closed. You can't take any public comment.
So it's only us who can.
Okay, so it's just in the order. Okay, sorry about that.
Can I just make a comment, which is, since I'm new, I'd love to see just the standard order of conditions as well as the list, because I don't know if we have those posted on the website and I've missed it.
Yeah, you can.
I can
Just going
send it.
forward.
Ethan, either Ethan and I will send that to you. We have it. We'll see you get it.
Okay, so we're gonna vote on the order. With the corrections that we've talked about. Is there anything else? Okay, so we need a motion to issue the order as, well, someone make a motion.
I'll move that we include the conditions as presented on the screen here, with the addition of the requirement to correct the typo and to clear the stream bed of branches and large debris.
Okay, good.
For a second.
Okay. Roll call. All in favor, Ken,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Eleanor,
Yes,
and I'm in favor of that as well. The next item is for 7:50, so 94 Butler Ave. Discuss, vote, issue order of conditions. Okay, well, we spent some time out there and this is, there must be some comments that people have. Does anyone have anything to say? Paul, you've seen it, right? And
Seen.
do we need Bill to do anything or to go over anything?
The Butler Ave site?
Yeah,
Yeah, I've walked it
Yeah, you
separately
said-
from you guys.
Yeah. right.
I mean, the only other, Ken, could you put those up for a minute? Now, we don't say anything about, this doesn't say anything about the compliance with the,
Last condition did, didn't it?
so that's the MCP is they report and then they provide us annual reports on, okay, I see.
No,
The only other thing is, we call it property owner most of the time, but then we also say applicant in the third bullet.
right,
Probably
Um,
property owner there too, no?
yeah. Ethan, do you or Elaine know how this works with the conservation restriction? Where it's a
I
town?
do. I do. Yeah, it is, I think I mentioned it there. It's all laid out in the, I mentioned the statute that governs it in the order of conditions. And then there
Yeah.
is a conservation restriction handbook that tells you how it's done and what's required. So when it's all written up, you have to send it to the state for approval.
Okay. So the reason why I was asking is because I didn't know if it was a long process and we're just gonna leave an open condition with this that.
It
at
is a
some
long
point-
process. It's a very long process.
So, so do we need some statement in this thing? We don't even have a plan of it, do we? Of the area that's gonna be conservation restriction. We don't.
Was
don't
that in
think
the
we-
project plans?
Well, no, there should be something to show us what area we're gonna have as, or worded somehow so that we know what portion of it is gonna be under conservation.
When you submit the conservation restriction to the state, you have to
Yeah.
submit a plan
Yeah,
that shows the conservation restriction area. So what we can do is we can take the plan that Bill has already submitted and
Yeah.
ask him to revise it and just show the parameters of what will be the conservation restriction and that will go into the state.
okay. So we wanna, so it's up to the town actually to follow this through. Like, we're not gonna, once we sign off on this thing, we're done. Do we need any statement in there that's ensures that we get it done? Or is just the fact that it's in the order of conditions? and-
Well, we could put a timeline on it. We could say, this shall be completed in a form, and this should be completed and sent to the state by, and then give a date.
Yeah. Because we won't be able to close out this hearing until, I mean, close out this order of conditions until we have that, so I don't know. That's something, someone else can work that out.
So do you want a timeline on it? Do you want to say it has to be done within 12 months, 18 months?
I don't,
What-
I'm open to suggestions from anyone. I don't know how it's done, and I'm just trying to ensure that once we sign off, we have some secure way of making sure that we get the wildlife corridor. So that's all I'm trying to figure out here. The rest of it's fine. The only other issue I had was from what I've been hearing lately, this wildflower mix is something that you really need to do all the time, like and I know you set it up for like 3 years. But
So I have here that, let's see, forgive me, I'm doing this on my cell phone, so it's a little hard to see. But it says, I put something in there that it has to be examined every year.
yeah,
And then,
One-
the conservation agent notifies, I guess it would be Bill, that it either looks fine as is, or it needs more overseed.
Yeah.
I didn't know when the best time of year would be. I put June.
Yeah,
Because I thought things would be coming up in June, maybe it would be May. And yet, if you put them in right away, they'd still have time to get going. Maybe May's a better month.
mhm. Okay.
I would, if you're going to do it in May, I would say the second half of the month because things may not be up in the first half of May.
Okay,
I mean, certainly that's variable year to year just because of weather.
okay.
Yeah. All right, I think
Or what's your thought?
I wasn't sure if the planting list made it into the plan. How does that work?
Following the restoration planting description. and
Yeah,
got
because
The notice
I
of
worked with
intent
Bill
and
on the
reference
list.
plans, so.
of native vegetation mixes, trees, shrubs to use that he picked from. So I think it's okay. I think we were specifying that it was native. I think you have to double check because typically if you have to redo a meadow, it's typically done in the fall, I think.
To reseed,
But other ones would be done in the spring. I don't know if Bill's here to weigh in because he has experience in this.
Bill isn't here this evening, although I
Okay.
spoke to him and he said he'd be available via his cell phone if we needed him.
Okay. I mean, I think just as long as we decide on a date once a year, that's fine.
Okay, we also could do it twice a year, spring and fall,
Mhm.
May and September.
May and September, whatever. Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Is it true though that these wildflower mixes, they really don't last long? Like they,
Well, you have to
Come up
be
and
careful because
down.
the wildflower mixes typically have a lot of invasive seeds in them.
yeah,
Like people dilute them and put Queen Anne's lace or other things that we don't want to introduce. They typically, some germinate sooner than others, so it could be the first year it's going to look one way, and then the second year it's going to have different flowers come up, or the third year. So what's laid down is not how it's ultimately going to look. And that's why sometimes people aren't happy with the meadow look. And that's why I suggested to Bill kind of mixing it up and doing trees and shrubs
Mhm.
as well, and not just having it, straight
Yeah,
meadow mix.
I thought we couldn't do trees or shrubs because of the cap.
No,
Yeah.
he's planting some.
But I thought that was on the edge, just beyond the cap.
As I understood the plan, he was gonna make, when they flatten the ground, and then he's gonna leave, almost bowl, like depressions when they're shaping it, so that it can have more soil to hold a tree.
Hmm.
To allow a larger tree to establish, meaning, if it goes down like this and then the soil's on top, your tree roots could go down deeper.
okay.
Let's see.
Yeah, I suppose that would make sense, because otherwise you can't get, your trees can't root through, you don't want them rooting through a cap.
So I think that's what he been reading his plans, that's how I had understood how he was gonna put the larger trees in and then surround them with smaller vegetation.
He's also removing all but about 20 trees, as I remember. 20
I
or
think it
20.
was more like 160.
Yeah, all but about 20. I think he's only leaving
Oh,
about.
yeah.
20 in
So, I mean,
place.
that was my only other question. It seemed like fewer trees, but on the other hand, he's putting shrubs and other things, which I think are fine, because oftentimes when you plant 2-inch caliber trees, and you're not there to water them regularly, they don't survive. So
Yeah.
I think he's putting in smaller saplings too.
So will this wildflower mix stabilize the bank?
What's that?
Will this wildflower mix, secure the bank? Because the bank is gonna be pretty high once he starts pulling the stuff back. I mean, it's something that's gonna have enough of a root system to
Um,
not allow siltation, or is that?
it
we don't have to worry
should.
about- Okay, I
Yes,
mean,
much more so than grass.
okay,
These have deeper roots and should stabilize it more.
okay. I just was, I was hearing that the wildflower mix isn't really that great, because it flowers once a year, really. Is
I
that
think
correct?
honestly, things that are more shrubby and rambling are sometimes better at stabilizing a bank, and especially if it's steep,
Right.
that's what you see moves in there. But it's hard to plant things like that.
Yeah.
But once he has things like clethra and some of the other woody things, those spread around.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll move in down there.
Yeah, they're putting stuff down too as well, aren't they? Anyway.
Yeah, keep in mind they're engineering that slope, right? They're
Yeah.
putting it at a specific slope. They're regrading the existing fill to maintain that slope. They're putting the stacked 4 logs with the stakes and the silt fences and everything. So keep in mind they are doing those engineering controls to maintain that slope.
And the core logs will help support vegetation rooting in there too, I assume that's part of the intent of those.
Yeah, and we already approved all this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just by the way, in the original NOI package, it's not in the plan set, but it has this plan, if you can see it, that shows the conservation area as a proposed conservation area.
Mhm.
So there is a plan out there that has that,
Yeah.
which I assume will be submitted to DEP.
Okay. All right, is there anything else anyone wants to add?
Well, if it's under the care of the Conservation Commission, then we direct what happens there, right? Like how it's maintained and things? The commission directs that?
It's an either or. It
I-
looks
I
like,
that-
right?
We don't have the right to determine how things are done under the MCP. So anything that's done pursuant to the Massachusetts contingency plan to remove the hazardous waste, they preempt us. Anything that is not under the MCP, the Conservation Commission moves back into control. But we don't have the ability to manage a hazardous waste site is given to a licensed site professional who is called in as a consultant on the project.
Okay, I guess what I'm thinking of is more on the maintenance front down the road. So if it's in
Oh,
the,
that'd be us. That'd be us.
okay, yeah, and we would say, no, we want it, the commission wants it to be wild and revert to nature or whatever as part of a wildlife corridor, for example. Like somebody couldn't come in and say, hey, this looks messy and mow everything down.
Ah, okay, I understand what you're saying. That we could, even after the order of conditions expires, we could put something in a continuing condition, and those kinds of specifics are often laid out in the conservation restriction.
Mhm. Okay,
I think just keep in mind as far as the plantings, those are already been in the application and approved. So I may be incorrect, but we can't go in there and say you should plant this, this, and this now, or change anything if we already approved what they proposed.
Ken, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you, but
Sorry about that. I just, my point is, they propose plantings.
Mhm.
So, and we've approved of those plantings. So it wouldn't be appropriate for us to go in and say, well, you should really use this instead, because they already proposed something and we approved of it.
Right. Well,
I
yeah,
understand the maintenance part of it, that totally makes sense, but as far as changing anything that was previously proposed and approved is a different story.
Okay. I'm comfortable with what they proposed.
Great.
Okay.
I'm more concerned about, yeah, the maintenance down the road and, you know,
Hopefully there's
keeping
no,
true to the intended purpose.
The Conservation Commission, the Conservation Restriction has in its opening sections, they ask you, what's the purpose of this conservation restriction? Is it for farming? Is it for agriculture? Is it for preservation of open space? These sorts of things. And in that section, you say it's for the preservation of open space and for the preservation of a wildlife corridor. So
Okay.
that when decisions are made down the line, they're made with an idea that you want to preserve the cover for the purpose of keeping a wildlife corridor. So any decision you make is geared in that direction.
Okay.
okay, so,
I have one last question before we close this.
yeah,
The last bullet point, there's a blank in there. Property owner shall report all restrictions, requirements under the MCP to the commission and shall make annual reports for the first blank years following the completion of work. So I think that we would be looking for the information that the LSP hands into the state under the requirements of the MCP. But I left that open so you could make some decisions on how long you wanted to hear back from him or her.
How long would the state require it? Is it perpetuity, or does the state typically have a time limit on how long they require reports?
Well, I think
Okay.
that the licensed site professional goes back to the state and says, that's it, we're done. The site is closed and capped and the work is finished. So I was thinking that this would be annually until that final report is made, so that we could keep track of it, even though we can't control it. And we would have the final report that is given to the Division of Hazardous Waste.
You want to
So
reword to say that, Anila?
the reporting timeline is, it's kind of intricate and confusing. So they do have regular requirements to submit to DEP, but they could end up closing the entire project within a year, for example. There's a series of during construction, it's 120 days, and then every 6 months after that. But there's also another overlapping timeline of when they can actually close a site out with a permanent solution. It's a bit of a mess. I understand it. If you want me to talk about it more and more, I don't want to,
So
I
is
don't
there
wanna
a
do that.
better way to phrase that than annual reports?
Do you want
Would it be
just to
better to
say
say at each phase of the project, something
just
along that line?
any submission, any regulatory submission made under the MCP, so we should be copied with? Is that, it'll be
That's
a lot.
probably
I
a
mean,
good idea,
there's
yeah.
a few different things, and I'd be happy to look at them. But you can just kind of require any kind of submission
Okay, that's better.
related to the remedial work shall be, will be copied on it.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. I will rephrase that to reflect this language.
That way they don't have to write like a whole separate report for us.
Okay,
That
We could
makes
just
sense, yeah.
look at
Yeah,
theirs, but again, it'll be a few of them.
okay.
Okay, this,
Okay.
we're voting on the order. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. So we need someone to make a motion,
I'll move that we,
close the hearing,
no,
and then,
yeah, didn't we close the hearing already?
you did close it already.
Yeah. So
okay.
I'll move that
vote.
we issue an order with conditions along the lines of what's presented here, with corrections as we've discussed, and a change to the last condition to reflect submittal of all reports given under the MCP to the commission following the completion of work. And do we want to see 3 years thereafter?
That would be consistent with other stuff.
Okay, so we'll get as per, and so the report on restrictions and any provided, and all reports made, and give us annual reports for 3 years following any completion of work.
So the annual reports, sorry,
Go ahead.
are they reporting on trees, shrubs, vegetation, or hazardous waste?
I think we're interested in the former, aren't we? We want to understand how the site has stabilized and been revegetated.
Okay, got it.
And they don't have to discuss the MCP,
Yeah,
work in those annual reports. If the site's closed up, that's more geared to what we need, what we're looking for as far as plant growth, cover, changes, etc.
Okay, I'll add just that, annual reports for 3 years following the completion of work to see how the site has stabilized and revegetated. So we understand why we're getting these reports.
Sounds good.
Okay, is there a second to that?
A second.
And we'll vote to issue that. Vote to issue that order of conditions.
You have to do a roll call.
I know, just looking at something. Okay. The roll call. So we have Ken,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes,
Eleanor,
Yes.
and I'm in favor as well. Okay. What time? Next item. Is the MBTA Communities Overlay Bylaw. Who's here for that?
I am. My name is
Oh.
Samantha Elliott. I am this town's senior planner. And I have I just closed. I do have a PowerPoint to show you some visuals so you can see where the district area is. So here, I'm here tonight to review the MBTA communities, since there is one parcel in particular that would be subject to your review, and then also to ask for your support if that is the conclusion that you come to. So let me get this pulled up. Oh. Sorry, it's taking me a second trying to connect to the network remotely because I accidentally closed it when I was trying to make it full screen. All right. All right, so the town, just as a quick background, many of you probably know that there was a proposal from a planning board subcommittee that went to town meeting in the spring, which was ultimately voted down in addition to a citizens petition. And then town council took over, created a subcommittee, and they've been working since July on creating a new plan. They've had public meetings. And there's a survey, there are 2 forums that were done, and in working with the public, they ended up gaining guidance on a new map, so entirely new districts, new locations, including an offsite component, and a little bit of variation between the different districts, which are referred to as character areas in here. So again, as a quick background overview, under MBTA communities, Wakefield is required to have a minimum of 36 acres, 1,696 units. Minimum density is 15 units per acre, and 75% of our district needs to be within a half-mile radius of a station, which are referred to as station areas, and 25% could be off-site. So if you look at this overall very zoomed out map, you can see the different districts. Most of them are within the radiuses. As noted, the 75% needs to be within radiuses. However, there is a highlighted area up at the top corner, which is most of what we'll be talking about. That is Audubon, which is the high-rise residential character area. And I can go through the entire presentation briefly, but of all the different areas under MBTA communities, this proposed iteration, but I do want to make sure I'm answering all of your questions regarding the proposed high-rise residential character area at Audubon on the Colonial Point site. So just to back up really quickly, if you're wondering what a character area means, because you saw that we're referencing different character areas and there's different colors on the map. Character area just has, it's a planning tool that effectively allows us to apply different height restrictions, setbacks, kind of development, meeting the current or existing development patterns in the area, and have them apply to different areas. So in a neighborhood commercial character area, you have what would have been there historically, which were mixed use structures with a 0 front setback. And then you have the high-rise residential area, which is what we're looking at Audubon, that allows for a more concentrated building without the larger impact on the surrounding wetlands and watershed area. And then there's also Foundry, which is referred to as the industrial loft character area. That allows for utilization of a smaller setback, larger lot coverage, and a taller, higher structure than you would find along North Ave or something along those lines, which are, again, the neighborhood character areas. So to kind of go over really quickly, the proposed maximum density versus the existing maximum or the existing density on North Ave, which is MOD stands for the MBTA Communities Overlay District. So and C is neighborhood commercial. NMU is North Avenue mixed use. HRR is the high-rise residential, and IL is the industrial loft. So this chart table goes over what the existing density is and then what the proposed maximum density could be along North Ave. Current density is 83 residential units. The MBTA communities would allow for a maximum of 3 stories, first of which is mixed use. And then the maximum density under 3A would be 156. On Audubon, the current density or current number of units is 176. Under MBTA communities, it would allow for 418 at maximum. Again, they still have to meet all of the other zoning requirements for parking and whatnot. Those are not waived. But the proposed height under MBTA communities would max out at 10 stories versus the 12 stories that are there currently. Under Greenwood and Albion, those are both neighborhood commercial character areas. Those would have 2 stories with a the first floor, the option of the mixed use, or they could do a 2-story residential building. And those would be on Albion, there's actually less, and that's because of the required setbacks and lot sizes. But on Greenwood, they could potentially see an increase down to 323. And that is right at the intersection of Greenwood and Main Street. And then Foundry is really, it captures most of the existing areas. And I have a map that I can show you in detail of what's currently developed. There's 458 units currently, which does not include the 65 units that are currently being built right now. And the max allowed under MBTA 3A would be 775. Again, that still does not include the parking requirements and whatnot, because there's still going to be, whoever would be developing it would be limited to whatever they could meet for parking requirements and required setbacks, maximum lot coverage, maximum building footprint. There's a number of different parameters under the bylaw.
So the 458 units that have been built actually contribute to meeting the 775 required in that neighborhood.
Essentially, yes. A lot of people had asked if we could get credit for the units that we've already built, and it sort of works like that. The maximum density, I think, would require once you start moving one component, something else moves. Something else has to get adjusted. So even if somebody did try to build or try to look at developing that, there isn't the capacity in how can I explain this? Most of the properties are developed over off of Foundry. There are only about 2 or 3 sites that are currently vacant that are located within the proposed district that could be developed. Those areas are all outside of the watershed and hydrology and away from Crystal Lake, which were all requirements under MBTA communities. So they're effectively just really right around what's currently built. So in order for those units to be built, and they would have to have all of the existing structures demolished, and even then they still have to meet all of the zoning requirements. So they still have to have all of the parking, be able to provide all of the parking required, which is 1.5 spaces per unit, which is what has been utilized elsewhere in Wakefield. Along with setbacks, there's a maximum building footprint, so they can't just have one really large, massive building. All of the different character areas kind of go over this in their own variations, in their own detail. The goal for the high-rise residential character area was actually to reduce the setback from the street so that a proposed building, if one would ever be built, would be pulled away from the water and away from kind of some of those what MBTA communities in the state, there are different layers they refer to as watershed and hydrology and wetlands, and I think there's a couple of different other ones that they include, but it really limits the area that's developable by right down to kind of the southwesternmost corner that's effectively really fronting Audubon Road. And so with this particular site, it currently has 176 units. In order for it to hit that 400 and what was the number, 18, they would need to demolish this existing structure and then rebuild it closer towards Audubon. They would also need to meet all of the parking requirements on site, and they wouldn't be allowed to go up to the same height of this one's 12 stories plus whatever the bump outs are for the mechanical spaces up there. But it does allow a maximum height of 10 stories. So it could potentially be pulling it away. If somebody, again, were to redevelop the area, it would have to be demolished. Yes.
10 stories is how high is that?
10 stories, how high is it? It's, I'm sorry, I'll have to pull up my other, see if I can grab both of these, the bylaw. I have it spelled out in the bylaw, but I want to grab the most recent version to make sure I'm looking at it correctly. I want to say it's like 120 feet, but that might be wrong. So hold on for just a second.
How high is Colonial Point?
I'm not sure how high Colonial Point is. I don't have a measuring device. The only way that the only information that we have is the stories there.
Mm.
So traditionally, on an 8-foot tall structure, you need a minimum of what, about a foot between floors to allow for proper load bearing and whatnot. So it's typically at a very, very minimum 9 feet per floor. Most buildings, other buildings and projects I've worked on are 10 plus per floor. But I don't know this one specifically. So hold on for just a second. I'll scroll down to the numbers I have on here. Okay, so the maximum height would be 120 feet or 10 stories.
Okay.
And then the building footprint would max out at 20,000 square feet. They're allowed to do more than one building. They need to have a 20-foot setback between two buildings. And then, let's see here, setbacks, as I had mentioned, were 20 feet from Audubon.
Do you have a plan view of where Colonial Point is and where the possible development would be in relation to Colonial Point?
No, because there is no potential development at this point. The only thing that we have is the existing site and the particular area that would be or is permitted under MBTA communities that isn't within the wetlands or hydrology or watershed area is really that southeasternmost kind of quadrant. If you're looking at this map, it's only half of the building is completely out of it. And it's most of what's fronting Audubon Road right there.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, any new development would be moved at this site would be moved towards Audubon Road.
Correct.
And run more, sounds like it would run more parallel to the road to keep it away from the wetland and waterfront areas.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So this is, again, the main site that would be under purview or would potentially be coming before you, depending on what's proposed. And the lot is the only part that itself that is a district that would be included under the current proposed MBTA communities overlay, which again is referred to as the high-rise residential character. This particular lot is referred to as the high-rise residential character area. It's the only area where you could have the development standards that I was talking about, with the 20,000 square foot building footprint, with the 20-foot setback, and the only place you could do 10 stories or 120 feet. And then I can kind of keep going through it just so you are aware. There's the North Avenue mixed use character area, which there's a historic photo of Wakefield and a current photo just kind of showing some evidence that there's existing, where there have been patterns historically in Wakefield that reflect mixed use developments. And this is another one where you can see looking north on Main Street, well, where Main Street's not included, but just that this has been something that's occurred elsewhere in Wakefield. This is back when there were streetcars all around. So just the other areas are shown on this map. There's Albion Street and then also Foundry, but the North Avenue mixed use one is in blue. I believe all of that stays out of the watershed and hydrology areas as well. And then the neighborhood commercial character areas, same kind of development as North Ave, where you have first floor commercial, residential on the 2 floors above. This area also allows for 2-story residential uses, so in a 2-story apartment building. Again, they still all have to meet the standard zoning regulations of meeting your parking and your setback and lot coverage and all of that. So we don't have an exact number of what could be built, but MBTA communities, the number they use is actually less than what exists there currently. What is existing there currently is 70 residential units. What would be existing or completely built out under MBTA communities would be 50. And that's partially because there's a 4.5-story building at the corner of Foster and Richardson that's included here. But again, this area is all out of watershed and hydrology, and there's no wetlands downtown, at least to my knowledge, in this area that would be impacted. And then the other one is in Greenwood. It's centered around the Main Street and Greenwood Street intersection, where there is already a mixed-use building. This has the same type of development where they're primarily proposing a first-floor commercial with 2 stories of residential on top, or a 2-story residential building. This area, if everything were demolished and built out, would at most have 323 units. But again, they still have to meet parking requirements and setbacks and all of that. This area also, last I checked, is outside of watershed, hydrology, and wetlands, so that it doesn't impact any of that. So really, and then the industrial loft character area is on Foundry. And there is a small area that comes up on Foundry of watershed and hydrology and wetlands, which again are the names of the layers in MBTA communities from EOHLC, the GIS layers that they have. And from Crystal Lake, there's a buffer that is required, and none of that is being touched by the proposed Foundry Street district. So those are the different areas.
Can I ask you something? So you're saying that they have to tear down everything like in that green area and then redo it? Is that
They
what
don't
you're saying?
have to do anything. If somebody's, so the way that this works is if there's a piece of property, let's say it's located in the Albion district, which is a neighborhood commercial. Somebody has the opportunity to either utilize existing zoning, which is the underlying just basic business zoning. They can utilize the MBTA communities overlay, which would allow them to do something slightly different than what current zoning has. They do not have to do anything. That property can just exist as it is. But if somebody chooses to redevelop it, they have to choose which zoning they're going to follow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, but for, like, if they're gonna tear down the building, what advantages to that?
The MBTA communities doesn't mandate doing anything.
No,
Correct.
I
Have to
understand.
open up the space for potential development, right?
Correct. The goal of MBTA communities is to allow some sort of multifamily by right. Wakefield has tried to capture, or at least the town and the subcommittee has tried to capture existing developments around Foundry Street and tried to utilize existing plans for mixed use around the downtown area after 852 survey responses, multiple public meetings, and 2 public forums, and numerous emails and phone calls and whatnot that I've had. Most of the feedback was to keep it out of the residential areas and to focus it in commercial. And as a planning tool, the way that this can work is that the MBTA communities mixed use areas allow for redevelopment with the commercial space to have similar parking to what happens up and down Main Street, that there's a 0 parking requirement for the first floor commercial space. And then the residential units on top are required to have 1.5 spaces per unit. So there's still a parking requirement. It's just, and it's consistent with other development on the area, but it allows a business to come in or a developer who has a piece of property and they could take a 1-story building, which is not currently built out to on what could be maximum density or maximum capacity or highest use, whatever the planning term is, highest use, highest and best use. But there's a whole different variety of ways a developer could look at it. And again, they can either follow the existing zoning or which is business, or they could follow MBTA communities, which allows them to have some different parameters by right versus having to go through a special permit process. So you get a smaller building, but you don't have the special permit process. Or you can have a larger building and go through a special permit process. So effectively, those are the 2 options that somebody in this area would have if they're looking to redevelop it. And it would still be subject to, like, for example, the Audubon Road site. Just because it is something that could be allowed by right without a special permit, then that does not preclude it from any of the other components that are required to be reviewed. Such as the infrastructure, your water sewer impacts, the Conservation Commission, if historical was involved in any way, all of those other entities still have their review process. It does not take it out. It just means that they don't have to go through the special permit process. If that's clear.
Pam, do you have a view of the Audubon Road parcel with the Title V buffer layer? Because that might be helpful to just show it. Okay.
No, I don't have access to GIS. Every time, unfortunately, I'm sorry. Every time I was going back and forth with the consultant, we were on Zoom and trying to toggle the layers on and off. I just don't have a GIS license currently from the town. But the parcel itself is very limited because of what they call like the runoff and the hydrology. I'm sure that may capture some of the Title V. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I see, like I'm looking at it now, there's a Title V buffer. So I think under MBTA, you can't build in that. That would be more restrictive than what the Conservation Commission has, which is 100-foot buffer, you know, where it falls under the Conservation Commission jurisdiction. But MBTA communities, I think, sorry, under that plan, there's a 200-foot setback. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it would be more restrictive if they opt in to the MBTA 3A zoning, which is less hurdles, if you will, to get your project approved. On the flip side, that currently is zoned residential, right? So somebody could come in and still put a different residential unit up there, try to make it bigger, but they would not, they would have to go through a special permitting process. Is that how that would work out there?
That particular site, I'd have to double check what additional density could be potentially allowed at all.
Okay.
Under current zoning, I don't know off the top of my head. But yes, essentially what you're explaining is correct. That's part of why with Foundry, if you actually look at the boundary, the colored boundary kind of zigzags, because we were trying to get out of that 200-foot required setback from Crystal Lake. And then there's also some sort of watershed stream component that kind of comes up near Foundry. So yes, this particular site, if something is non-conforming, it can't be built onto. But if somebody did want to redevelop it, yes, they would have the option of either meeting current zoning and the existing zoning and going through like what would likely be a special permit or some sort of kind of discretionary hearing, or they could go under MBTA communities and they would still have to meet all of the other letters of the law. In order to, they can't opt for MBTA communities and then ask for a waiver, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So Title V, are you talking about the septic regulations?
Yeah, in the MBTA communities, they explicitly bar you from developing on Title V area, like Title V buffers. That's what I understood.
Right, but there wouldn't, I don't think there's any septic out here on Audubon Road.
No. I mean, do you want me to share my screen? I don't know. I'm looking at the Albion one, but I could also, I mean, the Audubon, but I could pull up Albion. But I think because Albion is near Crystal Lake.
Right, but Title V is septic regulations. So the field, things like that, that's right.
Law. Sorry, why don't
Right,
you
but
continue?
it defines the area for the septic, for the leaching field and that's, I'm guessing that's why it's a 200-foot setback. But I can't imagine they'd have septic out at Audubon Road.
Yeah, they do have so what the big layers that when I was looking at it with the consultant were the hydrology, the wetlands, and the watershed. Those are the three that really dictated what our districts are. And there is a 200-foot setback from Crystal Lake that we could not include any. I mean, you can include a parcel, but you can't build on it under MBTA communities. The number is 0. They won't give you any units for it. So we purposely tried to exclude those areas. The only one that's slightly impacted is Audubon. But again, that's really, it's the southwest corner that's permitted to be built on.
So are you looking for like a letter of support or something like that?
It would be great if we could get a letter of support. I think the biggest thing that I'm here for is to make sure that questions are answered, especially with regard to Audubon, which has been brought up a number of times, that it could be, it's an environmental justice area. It could be potentially something that would conflict with Conservation Commission. So I wanted to make sure that before this gets to town meeting, or to the public hearing, the very end of the public hearing process, I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to respond or ask any additional questions that you had.
Is that red contour line the extent of the overlay?
For this particular area, that is the parcel line. And so the parcel line is what was followed.
That's the property lines then for that particular.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, because I mean, there's obviously areas that you couldn't get anything into. You know, they have a severe sewer problem down there. I don't know what effect that has on any of this, but
they would still be required to upgrade or
yeah,
have some sort of buy-in component or something to address that. It needs to meet all of the current standards to be able to handle a load like that. Again, as I said, that you can't get around those parameters. There aren't ways to get out of it for if somebody's opting to utilize MBTA communities.
So you picked this area because you guys picked this area, right, based on the criteria that you just said. Is that right? Is that how you picked this location, or?
Yeah, so there was, as part of the survey, there were a handful of different offsite locations that the public was given to choose from. And we got back 852 responses on the survey, and there was an overwhelming preference to utilize this site as the offsite location, which we're allowed to put up to 25% of the required units on an offsite location that's not within one of the half-mile radiuses of the train station. And because this particular area already has some other developments, it has accessibility to 95 as well as to the marketplace in Linfield. We had talked with the consultant, and they felt that this was something that that we could move forward with based off of, again, the results from the survey.
I have a question. You said
Sure.
that you need to be 200 feet back from Crystal Lake. And did you say you have to be that the area, the proposed building envelope is 200 feet back from the wetland on Audubon Road?
I don't know what the exact number is on Audubon. I would have to look up the detail and where exactly that line would fall, because we were the way that the overlays or the layers on GIS work from MBTA is they just kind of show a boundary. They don't show the same.
Okay. The reason I ask is I suspect that you have a 200-foot setback from Crystal Lake because it's a Class A water body, because it's a public water supply. And I believe that this area around Audubon Road is also part of a Class A water body because it's also part of the public water supply for Linfield. So one of the things I wanted to make sure got put into this mix was to be sure that you looked at the Class A water body setbacks under the state regulations and make sure that they don't contradict the requirements you have for the MBTA overlay, because you'll have to take the stricter of the two.
Right. I hear you. I can look up to that, but I mean, I'm happy to look that up. I do believe that was all included in the buffers that were layers from the state, as they did show the Crystal Lake one
So,
when we were looking
Elaine,
at the
when
other
you
one.
read the legislation, it refers to someplace, like when they are using the maps, they do refer to the Title V buffers, which, as Judy said, seems kind of strange, but I think it's addressing more than just septic. And you can see kind of the buffer area and the setback from Crystal and also Albion. I keep saying Albion, I mean Audubon, but it would probably be helpful to circulate those images with the commission to just look at
Yeah, would you mind? I just want to make sure that nobody gets surprised later on down the line.
Sure, absolutely,
you
not a
have-
problem.
Okay, and I think I
Elaine?
have somewhere in the office, what the Class A water body is in that vicinity, and I'll make sure you get a copy.
Okay.
You mean that's a water supply for Lynn, not Lynn Field, right?
Lynn, yeah, Lynn.
Yeah, it's the city of Lynn uses some of the north, the river for water supply, so to the extent that.
Yeah, there's a head to the Saugus. So
Right,
everything
Saugus River,
Saugus gets pulled into it as well.
right.
Okay, I'm happy to send that to the group, and I can pull up all of the different layers and send the various different maps over just so you can see what they look like overlaid on the existing parcel. Is there anything else or any other questions?
I think I'm good. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I'll go ahead and send that over. And then if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me, or if I need to come back to answer anything, just let me know.
Great.
Good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you.
problem. You guys have a good evening.
Too.
Next is the wetland bylaw discussion. Anyone have anything to talk about?
Jimmy, you may have seen my email. I sent some slides. Braun Delavope and I and Judy spoke about me sending some data from the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions, which I volunteered to show about just sort of what is sort of typical for wetlands bylaws in the state among communities that have them.
Okay. Has anyone looked at that? I didn't actually.
The slide is it's very sort of straightforward information.
Okay, I don't have any comments on it. I don't know. Is there something for us to comment on? Is this something for us to just look at, or I'm not sure what we're doing?
Well, so I think the question came up in the previous meeting about, sort of what were the parameters of Wakefield's bylaw going to be, and, the idea that there would be some at least review. So I thought it would be sort of helpful to show what types of parameters other bylaws specify in terms of.
How were the comparison towns chosen? The 4 towns that you chose?
Yeah, I picked 4 towns. I picked Linfield because it's a nearby community that has a relatively strong and protective bylaw. I picked Concord because it has a very well organized bylaw that might be a good model for just sort of, organizing it more so than the content. Bedford I selected because it had a very nice example of a security bond that was very clear and detailed. And the 4th one, Malden, I selected because it was a nearby community that's a more developed area. So if you want to see a bylaw for an area that has a lot of development, is very dense and urban. And Malden is the only example of these 4 that has only a bylaw. It doesn't have a bylaw plus regulations. It's just one document.
Because Malden, I checked, they've had 1 filing in the past year, 1 wetland filing. In the past 5 years, they've only had 10. And when you look at the mapping, virtually the only wetlands they have is the Malden River. So they don't really have a wide, I just don't know how, I understand maybe the meat of the bylaw, but I don't know how comparable that is. In terms of testing the bylaw, because if they've only had 1 filing, how many times in any of these has the bylaw actually been applied? Because when you look at comparing the towns, in the smallest land areas and the highest population density per square mile are both the same when you look at these towns. And it goes Malden, Wakefield, Linfield, Bedford, and Concord. So Malden and Wakefield are the two highest in terms of density population and smallest land area. So I think some of it, like Bedford and Concord, Concord has 1,500 acres that are held under their, they call it the Natural Resources Committee, not the Conservation Commission. And Bedford has 800 acres under their Concom. So I think, and when you look at population too, it's a giant disparity in population per square mile. So I think, I mean, certainly pulling certain things, certain elements from the bylaws, but I don't see that this is comparable to Wakefield situation. The majority of homes in Wakefield were built between 1910 and 1985. So that means most likely a lot of them were built before wetlands regulations, before there was a voting conservation commission, because that wasn't established until 1983. The average lot size is actually smaller than the others. It's a 1/4 acre. So I think when you look at the wetland mapping in Wakefield, you can see which areas will be most affected by any kind of bylaw. And they're the areas that have generally smaller homes that are closer to wetlands. So I think that needs to be considered when you're looking at setbacks and the like, because that's the majority of people will be affected by the bylaw are single family homeowners, if they're putting an addition, things like that. So I think that impact needs to be really considered.
Through the chair, can we allow Jennifer to present her presentation?
Yeah. If Judy's all set. You all set, Judy?
I'm all set.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Share my screen here. Okay, and I'll try to move through this quickly. Okay, so the data are from the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions. I have a link to the spreadsheet here where I obtain the data. The definitions are also available on the website. Okay, so as of November of last year, out of 351 municipalities in Massachusetts, 220 of them had a wetlands bylaw. This is 63% of municipalities in the state have a wetlands bylaw. If you look at this region of the state, and here I used from the data set, the Mass DEP Northeast region, which includes 84 municipalities. 71% of them, or 85% of the municipalities, have a wetlands bylaw. Within this region, this northeast portion of Massachusetts, the region we're in, if we compare similar communities, you know, in terms of towns, 57, this area includes 57 towns, 88% of them have a wetlands bylaw. It includes 40 municipalities that use an open town meeting form of government, and 88% of those have a wetlands protection bylaw, so have gone through a similar process as what would be required in Wakefield to have a bylaw. And within Middlesex County, 82% of the 54 municipalities have a wetlands bylaw. So next I'm showing data on what are some of the characteristics of the bylaws. This is among the 220 bylaws across the state. I have the detailed count information on the left-hand side, showing for this slide what is the buffer zone specified in the bylaw. And then on the right is just a figure of the data, which just shows in a very simple way the trend of the data. So 91% of the bylaws in the state use a 100-foot buffer zone or specify a 100-foot buffer zone. 35% of the bylaws specified a no build zone. And when they did, they usually specified a 50-foot no build zone. 57% of the bylaws specified a no disturb zone. And when they did, 25 feet was the most frequent size, followed by 50 feet of no disturb. 76% of the bylaw specified a buffer zone for vernal pools, and 100 feet was the most frequent size by far for a vernal pool buffer zone. And next I'm showing the frequencies of different additional protections that are specified within the bylaws. 74% specified that isolated wetlands would be protected or receive protections under the bylaw. This Y_B, Y_R refers to whether the protection is referred to in the bylaw, the Y_B, or the regulation, the Y_R, or both. So usually the protections for isolated wetlands were described in both the regulation and the bylaw. This is just kind of a sort of a practical matter when it comes to writing the bylaw. What do most places do? 70% of municipalities with the bylaw specified protection for vernal pools that weren't protected under the Wetlands Protection Act, meaning they did not require, they protected vernal pools regardless of whether they were certified or recognized under Wetlands Protection Act. Most of them did. A smaller percentage of municipalities protected intermittent streams, 24%. An even smaller percentage had additional protections for riverfront areas. 54% of the bylaws included guidelines for replication and replacement of wetlands. And 76% specified additional fees. This is just summary data, just in one place for these frequencies of this data. Usually municipalities that have a bylaw, almost always they have an ordinance, and most also have a separate set of regulations. So most have an ordinance and regulations, although some just have an ordinance and the regulations are included within it. Malden is an example of that, and that's why I selected Malden as a sample bylaw to look at for, you know, how they structure their bylaw when it's just one document. So here I just include the characteristics of these four sample bylaws. Linfield, which is a very protective bylaw, they have a no build zone, a no disturb zone. They actually have a no disturb zone of 100 feet for vernal pools, which is a little bit unique to describe it as a no disturb zone. And you can see the other characteristics here. They protect isolated wetlands, include vernal pools not protected under WPA, but don't protect intermittent streams or additional riverfront or have additional riverfront protections. Concord's is somewhat less protective. It doesn't have a no build zone. They have a kind of unique limited no disturb zone of 75 feet. You know, the other characteristics you can see here in terms of what are protected, what Concord protects.
What makes a limited no disturb zone?
You know, I would have to look that up. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but that's,
Okay.
I think, described in the bylaw. And I do have the link to the bylaw right here.
Okay, thanks.
Bedford's bylaw, a lot of these have very similar parameters. So these are fairly standard. But I selected Bedford's because it had a very clear description of a security bond. Okay. And then Malden's, Malden doesn't have a no build zone. It doesn't have a no disturb zone, but they do have additional protections for riverfront, which would apply to the Malden River, which most communities don't have. And partly for myself, I found it helpful just to look at the structure of the different bylaws for these four bylaws in terms of what's included. Maybe you'd find that helpful, maybe not, but these are how the four bylaws are structured. And you can see Malden just has the one, it doesn't have the regulations, where the other three have both the bylaw and regulations. So Braun and I had spoken and met with Judy about, and Braun had volunteered to do some sort of reorganizing of the bylaw, and I think that could be a potential next step that we could work on. I don't know whether it's something that the commission has an impression about today, but obviously it would be helpful in doing that to know sort of what the commission's thoughts are about, the parameters, and I do have notes on what the Wakefield draft bylaw currently says as well in terms of these parameters.
Okay. You sent that to all of us? That information?
I sent it to you and Judy to pass along to everyone else.
Did you just send it today?
I think last night.
Okay. Well, I want to take a look at this. I haven't really, other than what you presented right now, it looks interesting. So I think maybe
Judy forwarded it yesterday.
Oh, yesterday? Okay.
Mhm.
Does anyone have any comments? Very well
I
done.
thought it was really helpful, Jennifer, to just sort of see the different options and
Yeah.
how different towns do it. I know I had glanced at Linfield's and I had liked it because in the first few pages, I could tell what the regulations were about, whereas in other towns, they seem to start with all the exemptions and things. So it was kind of hard as a layperson to figure out really what, what it entails. So I think in terms of selling something new to Wakefield, as clear as we can make it, what the objectives are in the beginning would be ideal. And even if, we're not as restrictive as some of those other areas, just looking at the structure of towns where it's laid out nicely. And I was also interested to see so many towns doing the no disturb, 25-foot.
That's interesting because the no disturb is pretty severe for a small lot. I want to take a look at what you've done. Maybe I can
Elaine, what do they do in Winchester?
We're in the middle of rewriting our bylaws right now. We have a bylaw with no regulations, and our chairman is looking at regulations, and we're looking at Arlington. So we're looking to put regulations to the bylaw. The bylaws is short, simple, and was done in about 1987. So it needs an update.
And maybe I'll sort of on that point about the no disturb zone, I'll read what the Wakefield draft bylaw says about the buffer zone. It says, and this is on page 5 of the draft bylaw for Wakefield, based on experience to date with projects in the buffer zone, the commission shall presume that work within 25 feet of any resource area will result in alteration of the resource. This presumption is rebuttable. So I don't know if that reads to people as a no disturb. But it sounds like it's saying that that work within 25 feet will alter resource areas. So I think maybe the current draft of the Wakefield bylaw is not so different.
Does anyone have any comments?
I would think whatever we choose, we want to be consistent to other towns and the terminology, just so people understand it.
Okay.
I just want to mention one thing, that you may want to take a conservative approach, because if it's voted down at town meeting, you can't come back for 2 years. So if you start with a more modest base that you can build on, then you could go back in another year and add another element, kind of give time to tweak things. Because if you start off at a higher level and it gets voted down, then you lose momentum and you lose 2 years.
That's a great point. I was also wondering if the last time you guys, I shouldn't say, the commission tried to pass this, did you do public hearings to explain it and elicit feedback?
It's required that the planning board has the public hearings.
Okay.
And that
But-
iteration included fines, and that was the biggest sticking point.
Mhm.
Right.
But I guess as part of the public hearing process, was there a way, sort of like the MBTA communities, they've had public hearings and it informed what type of proposal they came up with? Is that something the commission had done in the past, or was it more the commission deciding what to take to the public and sort of approve it or don't approve it?
It was a while ago. I don't really remember.
Well, there were public hearings, so if people had input, then the commission, I mean, it was a give and take if people attended. I don't know how much.
I just meant like if that informed your no disturb or no build, that 15 feet versus 25 feet, if you got that type of feedback that informed the ultimate bylaw that you took to town meeting. And if that's something the commission would consider doing now.
I just remember like the magic number was 25. And I mean, it seemed like a reasonable amount for what we were running into.
Well, I think the conversation last time also centered around lot size in Wakefield. It's smaller. A lot of areas were built closer to wetlands prior to regulations. So enacting a broad setback would lock people out. Or it would put the commission in the position that if someone chose to file, then they would possibly have to deny it and take their chances when it goes to the state if it were appealed.
Judy, is there another town that you think is a better sort of model to follow? That's more similar to Wakefield, or that you think is more palatable?
I think it just needs to be catered to what the commission thinks is going to be. I mean, I think some of them are too broad for Wakefield. Even the performance bond, I think, might be a sticking point for people. That's why I think if you keep it as basic as possible for the first go around and try to get the most reasonable thing that could be approved, and then build on it from there and try to gain support, because I think it's difficult to, a lot of people starting from zero with not, a broad knowledge of wetlands and the value. So even a few public hearings, it isn't always that helpful, because it is a pretty big learning curve when you're trying to figure out why it should be important. And if the commission has a longstanding policy of 25 feet, so if you're going to expand it now, then there would need to be a very vibrant explanation of why it's changing.
Oh,
I don't understand too also, if we're talking in the 100-foot range, you'd be putting buffer zones right through people's homes. I mean, I mean, Judy's right about that. These are a lot of small lots.
Well, I think the 100-foot buffer zone, sorry to interrupt, I think that's specified in the WPA.
Yeah, no, I know that. It has to stay at least 100. I understand that, but if you're putting a no build zone or no disruption zone or whatever else you want to call it, in those 25-foot range, I mean, I think that you got to stay in that. I mean, I want to read some of the stuff that you did. I hate to talk without really knowing too much about.
But a lot of the time, sorry, Jim.
I think, I mean, you have to go out and see some of these things and see what people want to do and see how close the little streams are. And people have a hard time understanding, not that you're gonna allow them to do something that would be detrimental, but there's gotta be an easier way to pass this along so that people can do these little projects. I mean, I'd hate to see a guy couldn't get his addition built if he was 6 inches off or something like that, and then what are you gonna do?
I think she's focused on the 25-foot boundary. It's just that they're.
I like the
Is it
25 foot
25
boundary.
feet, no disturb? Is it 25 feet setback, 25 foot? What was it you were saying?
25 foot no disturb, but I would leave us the option of modifying that. I mean, that's,
current-
yeah, I think you need a way out.
Well, that would be built into it because that would be part of the permit process. If the
Right.
person could give enough replication or similar to the way it works now. It would
Yeah.
be reviewed and then the commission would decide on the setback. But a lot of towns include the buffer zone as a resource area. And I think that would be a hard sell in Wakefield.
I mean,
So
we're
when
out
you
of the.
say, Judy, sorry, when towns include the buffer zone as a resource area,
Because it's
saying
not
like-
well, the buffer zone isn't a regulated resource area now under the Wetlands Protection Act. So some
Right.
bylaws make it a regulated resource.
did you see that in those 4 examples, Jennifer?
Well, I mean, I think a no disturb is that type of
That makes it a
regulation.
resource area? Is that what
No,
you're saying,
it's-
Judy?
It's specifically outlined, the buffer zone is considered a resource area
Okay,
in a lot of the bylaws.
but we wouldn't do that, right? That would be hard,
I think that would be hard.
right? But that's not the same thing as a no disturb.
No,
Okay.
Right, I think the fact that so many places, the majority have a 25-foot no disturb indicates that they are accepting of building between 25 and 100 feet.
right,
and
but
all
the
conditions.
25-foot no disturb is the starting point. They still have the commission still has discretion to shorten that distance. That's not a hard line.
Yes, right. Right,
Right.
I mean, yeah, the current wetlands bylaw draft says this presumption is rebuttable and may be overcome with details about how.
So does that hurt to say, I'm just curious, this presumption is rebuttable, like, to an attorney who's motivated?
No, because
Does it
it's the same process as there is now. If someone comes in and wants to build, 17 feet away, and they're gonna provide replication, and you look at the area and see that it may be a better functioning area if they have an enhanced replication area, then the commission may permit it. It would be the same type of review.
And just a couple of comments. I'll just do a rundown of my impression from the Wakefield bylaw draft. It specifies a buffer zone of 100 feet, a 25-foot buffer. I'm not sure if you would call it a no disturb, but possibly. It protects isolated vernal pools, not necessarily isolated wetlands broadly, but isolated vernal pools. Includes vernal pools that are not already protected under the Wetlands Protection Act, doesn't protect intermittent streams, doesn't have additional riverfront protections, and doesn't have replication guidelines, but does mention replication as an option. And the second thing that I wanted to say, previously when the discussion about a security bond came up, I know that I think Elaine had commented that those are often in place for the really large projects where a developer comes in, develops a large development and then leaves. I don't know if there's a way to make that distinction between who's applying for the NOI.
Kind of like, isn't that kind of like discriminating against one guy versus the other if you have two separate standards? I mean, a lawyer, I think, would probably challenge that and say, you gave this guy this much, and you're gonna take this much.
Well, I think
I mean, the only thing I see is the 25 still seems like the right distance to me for Wakefield. For some of the stuff that you're talking about. 25-foot no disturb, I can buy that. I mean, 25 feet is not that long, but when you have a small lot, it can eat up, not that we have to worry about, you know, they have to just put in what they're allowed to put in, but, and I'm not trying to say that we should bend over backwards for them, but I just think that it's reasonable. It's a reasonable range, maybe even 30 feet might work.
I personally think it's reasonable, and you could work in a grandfathering piece. You know, for things that were built pre a certain date that happen to be closer. But the reality is we probably want to encourage people to be building, you know, further back from the wetland than rebuilding 5 feet from a wetland.
Yeah. Right. I mean, when you get to these, if you get to 5 feet, you might as well not do anything because there's literature out there that tells you that it's almost inconsequential. It's just a waste of time. So, and I always thought that 25 feet was the really the minimum that you should be working with, from what I had previously read in other articles. That's at least that's thought to have some protection because you're not offering anything at 5 feet. But it's the
So it
12.
sounds like members of the committee are saying no to performance bond. 25 feet seems good, but Jimmy, did you suggest maybe adding another foot, like a 25-foot no disturb and 5-foot no build? Like, I guess that would be 30 feet no build. Is that what you were saying, or was I?
What I would be trying to do is just make sure that we can find a way out for severe cases where, you know, it's not, you know, that it's not going to do any harm, but you're limited because of your restrictions that you put in place.
Oh.
But you have a
But-
way out because you can set, you know, that's what the permitting process would do, would set the distance, the setback distance.
Right, unless exempted by there's got to be language for that.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking something like, no build this zone for 25 feet unless you can prove that you coming closer will you not have any more of an adverse effect. You know, some of this stuff is, you really should go out and look at some of this stuff and see what it actually looks like in the field. It gives you a better idea when you see some of these houses and there's a little stream. Well, we have one right on Farm Street. The guy put in this a swimming pool. He was told he had a brook up there, right, Elaine? And he told him it was a stream, and he couldn't do anything with it, right? But we gave, I don't remember if we gave him guidelines or what we did. But then a couple years later, he comes back for a after the fact permit for the pool that he put in close, you know what I'm saying? So people, if you make it unreasonable, they're gonna do it anyways. I can tell you places where the guy was told not to cut down the trees because of the canopy. Well, he waited 3 years and then cut them all down. So you have that kind of, if you make it's so almost impossible because people, you know, land ownership is a big deal. You know, you telling someone that they can't do something on their property is a big deal. Not that you shouldn't, because you have zoning law. You've got other regulations as well, which is doing the same thing. They're putting restrictions on what you can do for, you know, just to get what you're trying to accomplish.
So I live, my property has a stream that runs across it part of the year, and we were told when we bought the house that you can't build on that section. And we knew that at the time of purchase.
Yeah. You step by it. Where do you live?
I live on the corner of Pheasantwood Drive and Old Nahant.
Oh,
I think you guys just visited across the street from me like a month ago.
I think so.
Yep. Yes.
I
we did.
actually saw you out my window,
oh, okay.
but I was too busy to say hi, sorry.
Oh, okay. That's your house? That's the new house that we would buy, right?
I'm across the street from the new house.
Okay. All right, I wanna, myself, I wanna look at what you've done, because you've done a lot of stuff, and I think it's very good. It's worth looking into. I mean, maybe we can work with the numbers a little bit more. Does anyone, Elaine, you must have a lot of experience with this. Is Winchester's the same way? What are they, 90% built out?
Yeah, we're about 90% built out as well.
Your projects are small things, right? Little brooks, little wetlands,
Yeah, we're small things, although now that we're doing what is happening with a lot of towns, so we've got tear downs where smaller houses are being replaced by much larger houses,
yeah,
taking far more of the lot.
yeah. I see this.
So with the 25 feet, we do 25 feet as well, with certain presumptions and some flexibility. So for example, we might allow some encroachment into that 25-foot buffer in exchange for,
Yeah,
let's say, clearing out the non-natives and heavily landscaping with native vegetation. So you lose a little, but you gain a lot more, depending on the circumstances. I would
Yeah.
say that with that 25-foot, I know you want to make sure that it's kind of sacrosanct, but on the other hand, you do want to leave yourself some flexibility to negotiate a result that might be far better in the long run than 25 feet worth of
right,
bittersweet vines and buckthorn.
right. I agree with that 100%, because it's you might find that the area really doesn't satisfy all the 7, or 8 parameters that you're thinking about, prevention of this or that. You might find that it's the area that you want to put no disturb is all rock or something. You don't want to, so you don't do it anyway. You need that way to get around, not to get around, but to be able to negotiate how you're going to do these things to get the maximum that you can get for protection. And I think Elaine, you pretty much said it very well. That's. Go ahead, Eleanor.
No, that just sounds like a reasonable place to start, what Elaine has outlined.
Paul, do you have anything to say?
Well, I think your caution about overreach is important to pay attention to, because we've certainly seen, for example, the presentation we just had over the zoning for the MBTA Communities Act. And town meeting in the spring session was distinctly unhappy about that. So and a lot of that had some overreach. So we need to develop I think, a reasonable approach here. I think the numbers, the 25-foot no disturb makes sense, and setting it up as 100-foot as the initial value for the buffer also works for me. Elaine, could you provide us with the Winchester bylaw? Do they have one?
Yes. Yeah, I can send
it might be another one that's useful to compare to.
You know what? I don't think it's as good as what came in tonight, because it was passed in I'll send it, but I don't think it's as good. It was passed in 1987.
Okay, yeah, so it's an
So
old.
it shows its age.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, no, I think the presentation tonight's been helpful to me, to help me start thinking about how we want to structure this. I think we do need to take steps, and we need to be careful not to do so much in the initial round that we lose anything, we lose it all. But I do feel like it's important that we start taking the steps to get it done.
I think part of the challenge with that first round of MBTA communities was they were receiving a lot of feedback. People weren't happy with the plan and it didn't change. That's why I'm kind of asking about the mechanism, to allow enough time to go out, present it to the public, and see how they react. If, 25-foot no disturb is, not negotiable, maybe we can peel it back a little or figure out how to get the feedback on how to make it more palatable. But,
And it's unfortunate that we don't really have access to GIS to take a look at the question. What kind of an impact would a 25-foot no disturb have?
you can see it on Mass Mapper. I was gonna screenshot it and
Okay.
send it to you guys. Do you want me to pull it up on the screen?
Either way,
I
it
can
would be
email
useful
it.
to get a look at it. I mean, I'm just wondering how many residences in town would really be impacted by a 25-foot no disturb?
There are more than you'd think.
Are there?
Yeah.
There's a lot. I'm sitting in one right now.
Okay.
Okay.
We're gonna go come to your house, Ken, and see what you've done.
No, it's not what he's done. It's what he does in the future that's more the issue.
I do have a project going before you folks,
Hmm.
hopefully soon.
Uh-oh. Are we all gonna have to recuse ourselves since we've been working with you?
Nope, just me.
Oh, okay. All right.
All
You
right.
want to move on to
Page of
61 bar?
mine. Oh, I just wanted to say on the first page of the presentation, there's a link to the data set, and the data set has links to all of the bylaws. So you could go to any town and look at
Okay.
and find their bylaw easily.
Oh, and just click on it. Oh, wow, that's handy.
Now, who sent out your who did you send your presentation to, Jennifer? Was it to Judy or to Elaine?
I sent it yesterday evening, I think, to Judy and Jim and Braun, who's also working on it.
Judy, did you send it out today?
Either last night or this morning.
Because I don't see it in my emails.
Yeah.
I have the beaver management policy, the FOLQ post, the draft knotweed, and a second round on beaver management.
It was also sent to the commission mailbox.
Ah,
I don't go there.
never look there.
Well, we can think about this some more, right? And talk about it
If you
again.
just pass it on, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then that gives me a couple weeks to look at it some more.
Thank you for compiling.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's been helpful, Jennifer.
You're welcome. A lot of work there. All right, we're gonna table that for tonight, and we'll put it up on the agenda for the next meeting. And take another quick look at it.
I just sent it, Paul.
Thank you.
So we're gonna go to the knotweed discussion.
No, you're gonna go to 61 Forest Street.
I am. Okay, driveway encroachment. All right, 65 Forest Street. Is the-
61.
61, is anyone here to?
Yeah, good evening, everyone, and thank you for your time. My name is Ilian, and I'm representing Roberto Palma in the purchase of 61 Forest Street. Part of the driveway belongs to the house, and another part belongs to the town of Wakefield. We met with Ethan a few days ago and provided him with a recent survey. What Roberto is asking is for permission to continue parking on the entire driveway, just like the family for the last 40 years has done so. He's going to maintain the driveway, and he's not going to change the size.
Looking at a street view of the property, what part of the driveway is on town property then?
Hard to tell. I would say approximately half of the driveway belongs to the town, maybe less.
Going
If you look
front
at
to
the
back or side to side, I guess.
split in half.
Down the middle.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. That's what I was
You're
trying
welcome.
to understand.
Okay,
The parcel is.
Own a
under
skinny
care and custody.
parcel.
Yeah, the parcel behind is under the care and custody of the commission, so there's a
Oh.
strip going into it.
It's a strip, it's an access strip from the road back to the,
But if you look at it on the mapping, it's highly unlikely that anyone is going to access from that section of Forest Street. There's no way to park. It's on the hill,
excuse me.
so it's not a likely access spot.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And how long has it been like that? Did you say 4 or 40 years?
40 plus.
40 plus.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
It looks
Oh,
sort of like,
that driving hasn't been there for 40 years. I mean, let's be real now, because it's a brand new code on that driveway, so, yeah, there's been a driveway there for how long, I'm not sure. I mean, actually, there's been a driveway there, but I don't even know to what width, maybe it was half that width before. And someone just decided to make it wider.
If you look at the aerials, I could find the 2005 and it was the same size at that point. So it's at least back that far. I couldn't find any other aerials that had a clearer picture, but it was that way then.
It was what year?
2005.
Okay. Is that when Mike Collins was doing the piping in there? Well, you
I
wouldn't
don't know.
So you're asking us to allow you to park on that or to use that driveway as your own?
Yes, sir.
Is this something we should talk to town council about, or town lawyer?
I think Ethan may have talked to Tom Mullen.
Okay, Ethan, is Ethan here?
Yep. Yeah, I
Ethan,
talked to Tom. He could only sort of provide me info on, I guess, who owns the land as far as the encroachment. I think what would be useful from the commission would be if you could make some sort of statement, sort of describing what can or can't happen on this land. Like if you want to alter it at some point in the future, have them come forward to the commission to present that. But as far as what Tom could say, there wasn't really a decision there.
Sorry, when we look at the picture, there's it looks like the driveway is paved right up to the house and the property line goes in the sketch 9 feet out to the left of the house. So how wide is the driveway?
Probably 18, maybe 20 feet.
And it covers half of the part. Sorry, I was a little unclear looking at the picture. Does it cover the whole passageway or just half of it?
Well,
Looks like
whoever
half of it,
paved
maybe.
it, whoever paved the entire driveway paved the part that's owned by Wakefield, and they've been parking there forever. So he just wants to keep using it as parking. That's the story.
Well, what are the pros and cons to that? I mean, what are we committing ourselves to if we say he can do that?
Well, the
Is there
pro
anything-
is what Ethan mentioned. If they do any improvements, say the driveway cracks or they want to widen it because now it has a bump out at the back. If they want to do anything, they would come to the commission. So you would have control over it that way.
It will remain the same as is. It won't change.
So does that get put into their somehow into their document for the purchase of the house? Or what do you attach it to?
It would have to be a file with the commission, like a commission electronic file,
Okay.
like a land file.
All right. Well, what do you think?
So they could essentially make a filing with us that provides that kind of commitment? What would we be asking for, Judy?
It's just a letter from the commission.
Oh, we would write a letter that authorizes them to continue using it for parking with the stipulation that the parking area can't be modified, can only be maintained.
Correct.
Cannot be expanded.
That sounds good.
Good
I
to
mean,
know.
I don't, looking at it, I presume that access strip and the Google, I've only got Google mapping, but it seems to be, it's a vegetated and rather unmaintained access strip right now,
That's correct.
driveway. And then is that land behind wetland or just simply Conservation Commission controlled lands?
It's Conservation Commission land.
Okay,
It slopes up pretty quickly.
There's a brook there.
It's what?
It has a brook there. Goes behind all those homes. It comes out. Mm,
It
And what do
slopes
you
right
think
up
of
though, I
it
think,
going-
behind that house.
No, I think a letter makes sense, as long as they can park there, no changes. If there's any changes, they'd have to come to us, and it would allow for continued access into the conservation area if needed.
yeah, if someone wanted to pass through to get into the conservation area, I would agree, we'd want to allow that to happen.
Yeah,
So if it's a simple letter, that sounds easy.
Yeah, and that seems reasonable.
okay.
How large a parcel do we actually control there?
I think it's 4 acres.
Okay,
Do you want to take a vote?
Can I add one thing? Is there any chance we could get some native plants out there?
in the strip?
The paved
Yeah,
driveway, right?
somewhere in here in exchange for the square footage of conservation land he's taken. We look at it as perhaps we might look at encroachment on a resource area and ask for replication in the form of native shrubs. We can get some kind of a feeding station out there for wildlife in exchange for allowance to park.
I think that's reasonable. I think, I think there's a bank there and wouldn't hurt to have some more vegetation.
So would you want that in the rear on the larger parcel, Elaine? Is that what you're suggesting? Rather
I
than in
think
the
along the
strip?
side of it, there's a wet area along the side of it, I believe.
But is that off property? Or are you
It's town property.
requiring something to be planted
Can
off?
somebody pull it up on the mass mapper? Maybe that's the easiest thing.
Hmm.
61, here's a strip. It's hard to tell, but here's the
Yeah, that makes
aerial.
it look like the house
Here's-
is essentially right up against the property line.
And just the
Yeah.
extra,
And the whole driveway is on our property.
the extra little strip of driveway to the left. It's hard to tell, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
what would be the official? It would be the survey or looking at this at the gist, because
well,
It does
they
look
already
like-
provided a survey, right? They already identified it, that it's town land, and they surveyed it as
Yeah.
part of the purchase, so.
Can you put that back to the way it was so you can see the trees and stuff? Yes.
Is there any open space on that or is it all treed?
Looks from the aerial I was looking at, it looks pretty much treed once you get off the private properties out by the road.
Well, there isn't much there, is there?
In terms of open space, not really. There's a yard.
Yeah,
I assume the wildlife is already using the driveway like they use mine.
Yeah, it's probably the case.
where it is.
Okay.
Where's the property on this map?
Looks, based on those property boundaries we just saw, it looks like the property line runs essentially along the side of the clearing and down the driveway, very, very close to the house.
What's confusing me is I thought there was a pipe crossing, little triangular area that was crushed stone.
That's not showing on any of the aerials here, Jimmy.
I know, it doesn't look like maybe I don't have the right spot.
Maybe. I don't know this area. Seems to me the only other thing we would want in terms of our letter would be that the wildlife core, any wildlife usage would have to be able to continue. They can't fence this off in such a way as to prevent wildlife movement, right?
Well, you can't fence anything off
Here's-
not on
here's-
his property, right?
Right,
You
okay,
can't
so he
fence
couldn't
off the
fence
town's
across
property.
the driveway anyway.
You'd have to, you could fence it off, but you'd have to leave a place for animals to get through.
Hmm,
So I think that is the spot, because I think, that, there's that area down there, I think that must be what, before they put the pipe in.
But if we say if any alterations have to come before us and we can
yeah,
Right.
review
that's
that,
fair.
so that's a kind of catch-all.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm
How do
fine.
you prevent, yeah, is there something you can, like, would it be an easement or no? You wouldn't? Like how, like, I guess yeah, what's the right approach? So if this house is sold, the next buyer realizes it is town property and has limits.
Well, that's part of their title search, right? That's part of
Mhm.
their
Yep,
property assessment and purchase.
that's how they found it in the first place.
Right, exactly. So
Okay.
All right, so, someone are we ready to make a motion or anything, or?
sure,
Hello?
I'll make a motion to provide the letter as discussed, allowing parking on that already paved area with no proposed alterations. And if anything is proposed, they'd have to come in front of the commission for review.
Okay,
And to allow, access via that strip through the driveway that they're using is maintained.
yeah. Yeah.
Is
okay.
that what we said? I'm sorry, I don't want to
Yeah,
take the lead
I
there.
think that covers it.
Okay. I'm okay with this, but I would prefer to have a map showing the area that we're gonna allow access to. I think that's a better,
Could you provide a copy of your survey that shows the,
Yeah, we have already.
Yeah,
Ethan has it.
Ethan has it?
I
Okay.
mean, yeah, but I'm talking about showing the area.
Well, we
that-
can incorporate the survey map in with the letter.
Well, I know, but you wanna somehow distinguish it from the other half of the, where you wanna put it, because things change over time.
So I take it, that's the survey, Ken? Thank you.
Yeah, so that's not showing. Oh, it goes,
Like where the current location of the driveway is.
Yeah, it's not showing the driveway, that's true.
Yeah, it'd be helpful to see the current driveway included in a plan.
So the 9 feet that you see from the house to the red line is half of the driveway, approximately.
I don't think we should be guessing about this. I think you should get over there and survey in the lot that you want to use for access or for your own purposes. And we'll have a record that we can always fall back on. I don't think you should be just haphazardly throwing stuff out there.
I'd agree with that, Jimmy.
And you can come up with, you can have an engineer or whoever did this come up and show and physically give us a certified plan showing the areas that you want to use. And then I think I would be happy. Then you can reference a letter right onto that too, onto the drawing. You have data information all over the place then. Does that sound reasonable? I myself, that's what I would be presenting.
We're simply asking for using the driveway as has been used for the last several years. We're not changing anything.
No, but you won't be there forever. If I'll make a motion that the applicant come up with a plan showing the properties, the parcel of town property that he wants to use for access.
So you're amending Ken's motion to add that?
Right. Add that to Ken's motion. And you have to have a second.
I'll second the
I'll
Or
comment.
if
second.
you want to discuss it some more.
I'd like to see a plan that shows where the current is. I think the plot plan is insufficient and I've been in neighborhoods where it is really hard to tell where that property line is that are a lot like that. And, just having a plot plan that says 9 feet out is not, does not show the current conditions or encroachment that's being allowed and would be continued. So I think it protects the current homeowner and it also protects the future buyer, right? And the commission, if you can provide more details.
It doesn't have to be, if we do decide to require that, it doesn't need to be super detailed, I don't think. I don't want to put unjust burden on the homeowner.
Yeah, just showing the current shape of the driveway and how much.
Yeah, if that's, I just,
Shape and dimensions of the driveway is enough. That's what you're looking for, Jim, on that plan.
I agree that it just needs to be accurate in what you're showing.
Yeah, no, I agree. You want to take a vote on that then?
I'm thinking.
Okay.
No, I guess I'm all set, yeah. So we'll do a, we have the motion, right? And it was seconded because we added on that other information. So we're gonna vote on, what we just discussed. Right?
Who made the second to the motion?
Well,
I did.
we're waiting for the, oh, I thought you were waiting.
Ken made the initial motion, Jimmy offered an amendment,
Yeah.
and I seconded the combination.
Right. All right. And you okay with,
Yes.
okay, Paul,
Yes.
Eleanor,
Yes.
and I'm okay with it as well. That's it, right? Hello,
Hello?
you guys okay now? Can they hear us?
Yes. Yes, thank you.
So we'll look for the plan.
Yeah. Okay, we're all done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
The next item is, knotweed discussion.
Am I able to share my screen? Maybe it's easiest to just, I'll try to go through this deck quickly, given the late hour,
Yeah.
and then you can review it more closely later on. Two screens, let's see if I can do this. Hang on 1 second. 1, 2. Oh, right. There. Sorry, I lost my menu. Team's doing something. Give me a second. Ah. Just keep it up. Sorry, I'm looking. I tried to share my screen and then I just lost everyone. There we go. Let me try this again. I'll just keep it like this. Okay. Can you see it?
No.
No? Hmm.
You're clicking on share and then the
I
file.
clicked share screen and then my screen 2. Oh, share.
There.
Is that better?
Yes.
I'm going to keep the windows up. Hopefully you can see this.
Mhm.
So I've got a lot of people interested in this topic around town. I probably am not going to bring my A game at 9:30 at night, so I'm just going to go through this quickly. But just wanted to do an educational resource to provide additional resources for people in town, commission members, understand what other jurisdictions are doing, and also what types of risk and what we're dealing with knotweed. So this is the first time I'm doing it. I'm totally open to feedback, but understanding and employing best management practices. I'd love to give it a scarier title. I think my favorite expression I heard somebody use was, it's like battling a, taking a medieval sword to battle a nuclear bomb. So that was the analogy that was used. Anyway, so these are some photos around Wakefield. What is Japanese knotweed? So I go through this, how it's become one of the world's worst invaders, particularly in wetlands, stream corridors, forest edges, drainage ditches. It's considered among the world's worst invasive species. And then I define invasive species and what else it's called. What are some of the destructive impacts of knotweed? There's structural, environmental, and economic. There's the risk of damage, man-made structures, roads, sidewalks, parking lots, foundations, just because the roots can travel a far distance and sort of exploit cracks and pop up in new areas. They can damage subsurface drainage, culverts, septic systems. They pose a visibility hazard near the road. Environmentally, they form dense thickets that outcompete native vegetation. They are allelopathic, so it prevents other plants from growing and become a monoculture. They don't, since they're foreign to here, they did not involve with our insects and animals, and consequently, nothing really eats them. So they don't support our natural food web. So we see in those areas where there's a lot of knotweed, particularly in other states where they're really tackling this more aggressively. They've noticed, reduced numbers of birds, mammals, aquatic organisms, all because of the loss of the change in habitat, really. It degrades water quality through increased soil erosion. It reduces soil quality and impairs the ability of wetlands to store excess water by depleting organic matter. So the ground is less spongy. And I'm sure you all have heard in the UK what a nuisance it is, and how homeowners struggle to sell their homes or get a mortgage if it's on their properties. They typically have to remediate it or disclose it. So how knotweed is invasive and how it spreads. It was widely planted in home gardens in the Victorian period, and more recently, it grows up to 8 inches a day. It has no predators. We talked about that. It does tend to colonize sunny, disturbed areas. And then, once it's established in those disturbed areas, particularly riverbanks, during flooding, it can break off, float downstream, and, those little pieces can then create new populations. Today, knotweed is spreading is most correlated with human activity, particularly bringing in machinery and little pieces getting caught up and transported. That's according to the Mass Government Guide, BMPs, preventing the spread of knotweed. Improper disposal of knotweed results in unintentional spread. We see in garden groups now people complaining they're getting little pieces of knotweed in their loam, mulch, compost, and it can easily regenerate in new places. And it's invasive throughout most of the world where it's not native. So the key to controlling knotweed is the rhizome. So I have a diagram and explain what rhizomes are, how they store food for the plant underground, and they're evolved to survive really harsh conditions. And this plant in particular evolved on volcanoes in Japan, China, and Korea. And so they can survive sort of dormant under hardened lava for 20 years. And we don't know many plants like that. What's also interesting is most of the knotweed that we see in most of the world, and particularly in Massachusetts, is derived from one plant. It's the genetic clone of this one plant that was brought to the UK by a botanist, Philip von Siebold, to the Kew Gardens. So that's pretty remarkable.
Is anyone working on something that would infect it?
What's that?
Is anyone working to identify a disease that would infect this?
They have. They've been. I think they've tried 1 or 2 insects without success, and still working on it. I would think the fact that most of this is genetically identical, you could engineer a treatment to
That's what I was
attack this
thinking,
particular
yeah.
gene, but I haven't seen that. It seems like a good science fiction story.
Yeah, yeah.
But what's really frightening is like on the West Coast, they have more varieties. They tend to have more giant knotweed or dwarf knotweed, which can hybridize because of the seeds. And so it creates Bohemian knotweed. And now suddenly you have seeds that are spreading, whereas at least so far in Massachusetts, we seem to be limited with the Phyllopa japonica. And so it's typically just spread by the rhizome. So here are all the ways it's spread. Again, this is from the MassGov invasive plant fact sheet, BMPs, but it's construction. You think of the places you see around town, it's typically near a construction site. There's excavation material, mowing, scouring. You see it off the train, but it's human activity. It's disturbed stuff. So best management
it will propagate from stem fragments and not just from rhizome fragments, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Sorry, that should be clear. Yeah, any little piece it can propagate, and so that's why mowing and like weed whacking is really bad because you can spread little pieces all over. So really, the best management practices are prevention, because it's really you can't get rid of it. It's basically you can control it, you can suppress it, but it's nearly impossible to get rid of established populations. So the prevention is avoiding clearing vegetation and using heavy equipment near riparian areas. Leave existing plants in place. Sometimes we, if we're thinking about invasive removal or are those dandelions so bad? Like, we might want to weigh the risk reward of bringing in heavy equipment and introducing something that could be worse than what you have today. Minimize soil disturbance, try not to import loam, really kind of keeping a low as minimal disturbance as possible. Stabilize and revegetate immediately. Invasives move in when you leave bare ground. Really big thing is inspecting work sites before you start and see if there's not weed present. And if it is, stay away from it and kind of come up with a plan to deal with it before you begin the project, as opposed to trying to remediate it after the fact. I've gone by so many construction sites where you see, they put down asphalt, there was not weed growing before, and then within 2 years, it's growing through the asphalt. So the other BMP they mentioned is cleaning trucks and vehicles between, cutting knotweed or moving. I think that's not really feasible. I think Judy's mentioned that too. So really, probably best practice is just to try to keep heavy equipment away from knotweed, and train municipal workers, landscapers, homeowners to identify knotweed and employ these best practices. Then I have best practices for containment. So I'll let you go through that on your own, and we can think about that more. In terms of actually tackling infestations, we want to think about safety, structural issues, but also valuing high-value native areas that are, of importance to the town. I think another best practice is if there's any treatment going on, to actually mark the areas you're going to treat. This seems really basic, but people tend to think what they're doing is working, and it's hard to evaluate without actually marking the boundaries of where you saw the infestation. Consider a 3 to 5 year maintenance plan. Do partnerships. So again, let's say you've done these BMPs, you've avoided everything. Well, you have some knotweed to tackle. This is actually by the Wakefield Memorial High School that's under construction. There are a couple of key studies that people might want to familiarize themselves that sort of I looked at that informed me of sort of the three options we could work with. There's a lot of stuff out there, but most of the literature and what other states are doing basically follow these guidelines. But there was an important study out of Scotland, actually it was Wales, Swansea University, and the guy tested 19 different approaches and found that chemical approach was the most effective. And then there was a second follow-up study about looking whole system, how to evaluate it, like from a environmental impact and from a economic standpoint, human resources, whatever. In that part of the world, people don't want to use chemicals, and the approach is often digging and covering. So the conclusion of that study was that both of these is that applying herbicide at the right time and concentrations was the most effective, the least cost over the longest term. Mowing and digging were the least effective, and these other sort of manual things least effective and most costly. Nevertheless, we have 3 treatment options, and then I identified a protocol to follow. So either the foliar spraying, which you do once, stem injection, which is King County has pioneered, and then cutting only, chemicals, no digging. Yukon has a nix the knotweed approach. So you guys can look through that. If we go the herbicide approach, it's really important for people to kind of understand the timing and what's involved. And I loved this Massachusetts support group Facebook site, took this sort of heady science literature and, did some very basic bullets that make it very easy to understand the approach. So I've laid those out, explaining how cutting makes the roots grow deeper because you're dealing with a plant that grows through rhizomes. So it's the more you cut, it runs away from the attack. It can play dead for 20 years. The whole point is you apply the herbicide, at the right concentrations and during between flower fade and the first frost. That way it's after the bees have used it, and it's also when the plant is drawing down energy to basically store nutritions into, I need to update this, it wasn't roots, this should be rhizome for the winter. And then that's how it's drawing in the poison, and that's like a Trojan horse that weakens the plant. And so you see in the next year, it's not able to roar back to life. But the reality is you have to continue treatment, for at least 3 to 5 years, and you're monitoring the site. So here's a treatment schedule that Penn State Extension does. I like their approach. It's very direct and basic. I have tools that have been talked about. And again, the mowing, it consistently said that was not effective, but people do mow if it's part of a targeted plan. So you might do a mowing like early in the season, and then in the fall, you follow up, and that way the knotweed is, say, knee level, and you're not spraying overhead, so that can make sense. And so they do allow for that sort of early season cutting approach. I have something about native plants post-treatment. So thinking about, when you remove this stuff and you apply herbicide, it can be difficult for things to revegetate. Sometimes it's other invasives that also move in. So something to consider. I think there are things for us to consider as a commission, whether it's more stringent bylaws or, whether we permit invasive removal, I think we just have to weigh the pros and cons a little bit more. And then also in terms of maintaining, public properties and thinking about how we can be strategic. I've included a bunch of news articles just to read. I thought these were very easy and conveyed sort of how serious this issue is. I think one of my favorite general references is this video, which you can watch without interruption on Bing Videos, and it's an hour long. It's Uninvited, the Spread of Invasive Species documentary, and it was put together by New York State Environmental Conservation. And it really explains like the economic impacts of the invasive species they're dealing with, and also talks about knotweed. And then I think you guys heard there was a family that won a $300,000 settlement against a developer related to knotweed, or they were awarded. He's now contesting that. And then I've listed some sources which you guys can look at, and if you want to add more, but I was trying to just limit it to solid sort of scientific stuff. And that's it. And then I've just included a few photos that people sent in around Wakefield, showing sort of how prevalent knotweed is, on private properties and also on public ways. Like this is some knotweed growing through a parking lot. We're starting to see it around Lake Quannapowitt now in places, and then Oak Street. So we can see, but that's it.
Very good.
Questions, comments, or you guys can mull it over at home.
Yeah. I think I'll mull at home. Very good.
Pretty comprehensive, thanks.
Yeah.
I think I need to just edit the sources or work with somebody who's good at sort of copywriting and being consistent. And we'll see. I did have somebody from the Sustainability Commission who was interested in posting it once this is put together.
Have you passed this on to Bill Renault and team? For the
No,
guys-
because I wanted to
guys
get
at home?
comments from you guys. I didn't really get much back.
I'll take a look later in the week and see if
Yeah.
I have any thoughts. I'll send them to you.
Okay, thank you.
Put it on a. I've got the
I'll stop sharing.
version that Judy sent out earlier, so I'll make sure to.
I just moved the pages around. But yeah, it's fine.
Thanks.
Thank you. That was very good. So
Thank you.
we need to move on. It's almost 10 o'clock. So do we want to talk about shoreline mowing now, or do we want to pick it up a minute?
Have you had any conversation with Dennis on that, Jimmy? You were going to.
Eleanor has.
I think it'll be a more fruitful conversation if we can share the guidance, like the specific guidance that we should be focused on.
Yeah.
I can send what I pulled, and then maybe Ethan, you can send sort of the maintenance argument, the maintenance of existing vegetation. I think, maybe you can summarize, Jimmy, but I think two things, like look at that, and then having, I'm not sure if any commissioners actually walked the lake and saw the work going on, and how it compares to other properties around the lake.
Mhm.
So I think that's helpful. I think the only question is the existing, and does existing go back to 1970? I think that was sort of the argument I heard him making, that, once upon a time it was all grass and he was just restoring it to how it was. And I'm not sure how far that goes back. Because I've definitely seen areas around the cove area that have been vegetated for a long time, as long as I've been here. So I'm not sure those should, I think the commission has to go. This can't be, I think the commission has to go and look at it. And I thought at the very least, there should not be work below the bank. I'm not sure what concessions we got.
What do you mean, from Dennis?
Yeah, I think, well, Ethan, can you share what the guidance you found?
Oh,
Yeah, I'll have to look to find the specific details, but it seems like from what we talked about, maintenance of previously landscaped areas might have a different sort of jurisdiction.
I think the guidance says existing landscaping, but
Yeah,
double check, because those words are sometimes important.
yeah, I think the interpretation might be different from what the words themselves say, so we'll have to take a closer look at that.
And then I'd be curious how other commissions deal with that. Like Elaine, I don't know how, if how you guys deal with it in Winchester.
We're not. I'm trying to get us to start moving on it. And actually, I'm going to send them your presentation, Eleanor, because it's so nice looking. We need to get on it. We do have shorelines, and we do have maintenance. At one time, Winchester, we've got a river running through the heart of town, and it was mowed all the way down to the water. And at that time, our biggest problem was Canada geese. So we requested the DPW to stop mowing the last 10 feet or so and allow a natural buffer to grow up, which we thought would discourage the geese.
Mhm.
It didn't. They just made pathways through it. And then as the time went on, it's a wildlife corridor, which is nice, which we didn't have before. But now we're spending our Aberjona River invasive species days twice a year with 50 people who go around to these same areas and do what you've done in Lake Quannapowitt, just pull out these vines, pull out the buckthorn, and do a lot of volunteer maintenance. So they're not mowing down to the water, but on the other hand, we don't have this broad open lawn, which is the vista on the lake. I'm trying to think. We've got some on the Upper Mystic Lake, but it's a beach, and so it's all sand. And we did cut back some on some of our parks and took out a lot of the invasive species. And by the time we took out the invasive species, the native species are just beginning to come back. So at the moment, we have a nice view. Once those native species grow up, we'll have to make a decision on the native species versus the view of the water. So I don't, to put long story short, I don't have a definite answer to say we're doing Winchester and it works out really well. We're working our way through it.
So I wasn't part of the conversations, but just to clarify, there was pushback on their end about wanting to mow because it's been maintained for so long. They want to continue. Is that what happened?
They're allowed to continue mowing.
Yeah. Yes, it was basically he's been doing it they've been doing it for many, many years, and the Conservation Commission, it wasn't an issue. But now I'm asking the question because I've, actually seen the vegetation, and I don't like to see good native vegetation mowed down. And I have questions about, I think in particular, a place like Veterans Field, where we just approved an order of conditions for Bill Renault, for town engineering to do work there, and basically FOLQ and I said, you can save the town money. You don't need to do rain gardens. You have these same native plants. You've got clethra, you've got buttonbush, you've got all these things that you were going to purchase, and they're actually growing there now. Why,
No, I understand that. I'm just saying they didn't come back and say, oh, okay, well, it wasn't determined if they needed to do it. It was more of a pushback that this is what we do and this is what we're going to keep doing.
That was kind of my sense.
Okay, thank you.
And I wasn't sure, Jimmy, Ethan, were you arguing that they could mow down into the below the bank?
I'm arguing that there's a difference between it says landscaping, you can prune. So that's a little bit different than what you're talking about pulling, if you want to start digging the ground and moving stuff around, that's one thing.
Well, when you're mowing it down to the ground and down the edge of the bank, that's not vista pruning.
Well,
I think, this probably is not going to go anywhere until we actually share the guidelines and maybe people go see it in person. Would you like, I'll send what I have across to the commission and you can look at it. And then I'd love to just see the more details. Personally, I think the town will wind up evolving its thinking, especially if they care about the health of the lake. I do worry about removing native vegetation down at the shoreline, down on those rocks, near Phragmites, because I don't want to see, you pull out the stuff that's easy to pull, you leave bare ground and you're just allowing Phragmites to spread.
So I have a question, for Eleanor. If you pull out the invasives and you allow the natives to grow up, that's a very long shoreline. Who does the kind of maintenance that keeps the natives and removes the invasives? It strikes me as a project that requires some kind of skill, identification skill, which your group clearly has. But I'm not sure that's quite the same skill set as the DPW has. Who does all that maintenance around the shore?
Well, I would think in some ways it's, you have to be strategic about what areas you want, right? There's certain parts that should be open, that makes sense to be open near the water, and then other parts that you should allow to grow.
So a certain part of this is to identify your zones.
Correct.
And then have your zone. Okay, that's
okay,
good.
So for example, we identified a zone. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I think identifying your zones is a big step forward, because then it knows people who want vegetation versus people who want the view know what we're talking about and trying to make a decision about. But assuming you establish your zones, your non-mowing zones, who does that maintenance?
Well, right now what's growing there doesn't get that tall, but I think a shearing once a season is less maintenance than taking a mower every week and, you know, cutting back the vegetation, mowing
I
it
get that.
to
I
make
think you're
like
right.
grass.
But who keeps the bittersweet and the buckthorn and the purple loosestrife at bay in those areas you want to
Right
target?
now it's volunteers, because if you're mowing it, you're just spreading it around. You're making
So
it
you-
worse.
Okay, you think you can keep up, the town, can keep
Oh.
up a good amount of volunteers year after year?
I think so. I think what's tough, you identify those areas that are already high quality native. Veterans Field was good. There was an order of conditions. What Dennis, oh, sorry, what our I think what my understanding is that he is going to keep mowing that area, even if engineering says it's no mow, until the order of condition, until the project work stops, and then he'll leave it alone.
So am I correct in thinking that you're going to prepare a document which will include the
Well,
work?
he has to agree. It doesn't.
Work- I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure he agrees. And again, I think I'm not trying to be difficult. I've talked about this issue since May. I've never seen great guidance on the maintenance front in terms of the exemptions. It's not just landscaping, it's habitat.
I get all
Animals.
of that. I get all of that. I understand all of that. And there's
Mhm.
a lot of I agree with. My question is there going to be a guidance document with a plan that shows areas and how each area presumably is to be measured, is to be maintained? That would be great. That would be a
Yeah,
great.
I mean, I think FOLQ could definitely work on that. And I would be happy to provide guidance. I work full time, so I don't have the ability to do that. But
You think FOLQ, you think the volunteers in FOLQ could do a basic document that we could build on?
I think so. Like, we have started identifying what's there already.
Okay.
You know, and they have free rentals. You know, the day I went and stumbled across them, you know, they had removed so much, and it was beyond this area in Hall Park. I'll send a picture. It looked great. She had 6 new volunteers who had never volunteered before, and they came back the next week, and all their work had been just mowed down.
Well, I tell you what, Eleanor, I would be happy to help out on this. If there's some
Okay.
people in FOLQ and who can identify these areas, I can maybe send them a plan. We can work out areas. Tell them I would be happy to help out in doing something in terms of getting the material together, getting the plan together, getting the maintenance requirements. And they have my email address, and I'd be happy to
Okay.
put together a package, help them put together.
Okay, great. I think my other concern is just having consistent, consistent rules for people around the lake, like all property owners around the lake.
Well, this is a good start.
Okay.
So yes, I would be happy to help out if they want to contact me, and I can start a conversation.
Sorry, Jimmy, I'm fading.
But say
I'm
you're
sure you
fading,
guys all are.
I'm fading too. Are we all set for tonight then? We're gonna,
No,
about this.
Ethan's report.
I know that.
That's the only thing left.
I know that. Then didn't forget about it.
Okay. I'll keep it short. Just one thing I wanted to mention. The DEP established Wakefield, as well as like about half the state, as being in a mild drought, just a level 1 drought. Just something to be aware of. It might have some implications for like intermittent streams, but beyond that, it's not too prevalent here.
That's good information.
Lake levels on Lake Q at all?
What was that?
Has it changed the lake level on Lake Quantapowhat at all?
It's very low.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
heard
just
that last time I was over there. Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean
It's-
general water levels have been low, like with streams, especially.
so those drought kind of determinations are a little tricky.
Yeah.
And they, they affect municipalities as far as putting out restrictions for watering. That's kind of what guides that, and it also affects drinking water providers. It restricts their flow and what they discharge. So it's a very kind of tricky thing. I don't think it affects us too much, but if it gets bad, then you start getting into requirements for restrictions and stuff like that. So it's always good to keep an eye out. But it's been sorry, I work with the guy who's part of
Yeah.
the committee who actually determines these, and comes up with it. It's very political. It's pretty interesting. But we haven't really been affected here too much this year, especially as compared to last year. So thank you, Ethan. Something to keep an eye on and to be aware of.
Yeah, for now it's mostly just guidance. They say like reduce water usage. There's nothing that they're requiring, as you're saying. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I know you have those connections there.
Thank you for mentioning it.
Yep.
Good job.
Okay, I believe that's it.
Okay.
Does anyone have anything else they want to add before we?
Yes, sorry, I don't want to end on like a negative note. It was very valuable to have that conversation with, the head of the forestry department, because there is an element of cost and time and resources, and that has to be factored in. I did just have a question on who's managing the Conservation Commission mailbox, and how emails are forwarded or not.
I think Haley is now, it's usually shared. It's supposed to be passed off, so each person has a responsibility, but she's been doing it for a while. So I don't know how
Okay.
often she checks it.
Would Ethan be taking it on? Because that would be nice
Yeah.
to.
I don't think so, because it's made separate. So it goes just to the commissioners. So I don't know what the protocol is for that, but it's generally not something that the agent would be managing.
There is a separate email address just for the agents over the commission.
Okay. No, just because there've been a couple of emails coming where people have said they're not getting responses. But sometimes we're seeing them and sometimes we're not.
But most times they'll send them to both email addresses. A lot of times I get them as well. They'll be sent to like three different email addresses that all go to the same place.
Okay, but so if whoever is managing the mailbox could forward these on timely, or if you see we're copied on it. That's all.
Okay, someone want to make a motion to close the hearing?
I'll make a
Move to
motion.
adjourn.
Can I have a second? I'll give a second. I second it.
Okay,
All in favor, Ken,
Yes.
Paul,
yes.
Eleanor,
Yes.
and I'm okay with that as well. Good night.
Good night.
Thank
night.
you, everyone, for all
Complete.
that information. It's great.
Yes.